Hello, and welcome to the fourth video in this series on Microsoft Excel in practice. Guided Project 4-3 is really a big deal. We have made it beyond the basics. We are now intermediate users of Excel. We are going to be looking at an entire new philosophy of what it takes to use Excel. What do the people that aren't beginners start thinking in terms of? As always, I've preloaded SimNet so that we can get quick access to the project. I usually recommend pausing at this point so that you can catch up, but I'm going to actually give you a bit of background information on this while you catch up with me. The thing that I want to make sure that you realize is happening now is that we have gone beyond what we would typically think of as a document at this point. Once you're dealing with Chapter 4, this is different than when you have something like Microsoft Word and you send a Word file to somebody and the best they can do is hack in and edit what you've already put, make changes to your document and just make the document different. Same thing with PowerPoint. You can send somebody your presentation, but it really is your presentation and what they get out of it is what you put in. They can try adding more and changing it and such, but at that point they're becoming the editors, not you. Excel has a totally different philosophy. And in this case, we're going to be dealing with the idea of a document that you create and work on as a team. It's not enough just to be able to create something entirely on your own and use it on your own. That's helpful. It makes Excel a good tool for you. But when you become an intermediate user, what you have to start thinking of is you are going to be working with teams, especially in employment situations. And these teams could be distributed across various buildings, across different states or countries, or even the entire planet sometimes. You want to put together your data from all these different points. So lots of people are going to be working on various workbooks at the exact same time. One of the problems that this will cause is that you're going to have to start getting your data from various people's sources, whether it's web pages or different Excel worksheets or even Access databases. Sometimes it's a simple text file that just lists what's in there. You're going to have to be getting your information from other people. You're going to have to copy sheets between workbooks. You're going to have to do things that allow other users to understand what it is that you're trying to achieve with your data and sometimes manipulate it in ways that won't have a permanent effect but let them peek in at what's going on. We're really stepping up to a whole new level of Excel at this point. Let's start to see what this project offers us. Hopefully that you've had enough time to get to where I am on screen. We're going to do a project. We'll use the projects link on the left to see just the projects. Remember, I have Access projects here. We'll have to get past those, and you might have other software here. We want Excel 2013. 2016 also works with these projects as well. Guided Project 4-3. When we click on here, we'll see the same instructions that we always see. There's our best practices that long ago told us how to use this page. We have our instructions and our start file that we use all the time. And notice this time there's an additional link over here called resources. What a resource is it is something that isn't the file we're actually working with, but we're going to make reference to that resource while we do our project. This is a lot like if a coworker sent you a file from their desktop and you're supposed to integrate that resource somehow into your project. That's exactly what we're going to use this for. So the very first thing we have to do, don't worry about the instructions right now or the start file. The first thing we have to do is get these resources on our computer so that we'll be ready for the project. I'm going to click this link, and I'm doing this on Microsoft Windows, so it's going to be able to open up right away what this zip file includes. So I'll OK it. It's going to open up, and we'll see that we have a Clemson expense data file. Ends in CSV. We'll talk more about what the CSV files are, but for now we just have to get it somewhere. I'm just going to point to it, hold down the mouse button, drag it over to Documents. It's as good a place for it as any. And since we use our Documents file a lot, it should give us a chance to find it very quickly too. That's all it took to get the document there. When I click on the Documents folder, you'll see the list of various things you've done, and there is our resource ready to be used. Remember, that's not our start file, but after we've been working on our project for a while, we're going to need to make reference to this somehow. We can close this window. We've got everything we wanted out of the resource file. Now it's time to start the familiar process. First, we open up our instruction sheet. Adobe Reader is going to open up, and As always, I recommend that you print this out so that you can have a copy that allows you to work along quite easily. I'm going to adjust mine so that I can put it at the top of the screen and see the instructions as I work. This helps you with the video. I also keep a paper copy around just in case I have issues here, so good practice. And finally, I'm going to open the start file, and I'll have it automatically open in Excel. And you'll see Excel opens up, and it's going to have a couple worksheets pre-made for us, ready to be manipulated. As always with the instructions, some of the first things we're going to do involve saving this again. This involves, same as we do every single project, we enable editing, and then we're going to do a file and save as. I'm going to pick a place to put it, and again I'll put it in my documents. And you'll use whatever name that is either given to you, or if your instructor gave you something else, that's fine. I remove the copy of on a regular basis and hit save. And now we have our own personal copy ready to work with. Again, you can make yours full screen. I'm going to make mine just at the bottom of the screen so we can see instructions at the same time. Alright, time to work on a totally different level. I'll give you the background information first that they have on the top. This Clemson Imaging medical imaging company wants to analyze expense reports from its field representatives and its patient data. We're going to have to use the two sheets that they gave us and this CSV file and various resources in order to create something that will allow them to analyze their expense reports. Now notice, you're not doing all the analysis yourself. You're creating tools for them to be able to do this. So part of it is going to be your analysis, part of it's going to be open to them so that when they use this book, they can do things with it. Notice the long list of skills that we have. This is a lot bigger than we've seen in the last couple projects. There's a whole lot of new concepts here, but they're pretty straightforward concepts. They're just concepts within this different world of sharing your workbook with other people. We've got a warning up top about making sure that we've downloaded our resources, which we already took care of. We've opened the file, we've enabled editing, we've automatically saved it. So we're ready to get started. One of the skills that they've taught at various points is that you can copy your own data. They want us to copy the past and projected sheet. If you remember our copying data sources, you can see here's our past and projected. To copy it, we just right-click on the tab name, we say move or copy, and a little box pops up asking us what sort of move we want. We want the copy sheet to have a new name, and it says to position it to the right of past and projected. That's a really interesting way that they phrase it. They say they want it to the right, so they want it after the past and projected sheet. Notice the dialogue. They're intentionally making this difficult to make sure that you get the concept down. It's going to be in the exact same book that we're working in. It wants to know which sheet we want it before. So this one tells us which one it will be after. This one will tell it where it is before. So if we want it to the right of past and projected, that means we want it before expense info. You'll see that in 4, they expect you to have gotten through the basics. They are not going to give you the elbow room that they did in the past, and they are intentionally going to throw things like this at you to make sure you're really paying attention. Notice also, they don't tell us things like make sure you click the create a copy checkbox. But if we're going to copy instead of move it, we're going to have to click that box. So they are throwing things like this at you on a regular basis now. Get used to it because they're never going to make it any easier. I'm going to OK that. And you will see here's past and projected, and we've made a copy right to the left of past and projected. It's before expense info. It's to the right of past and projected. So we've accomplished number 3. They just want us to change its name. Again, they're not telling us how to do it, but double-clicking always works for that. ADV filter is the new name, and we hit enter. So step 3 is done. Now we're going to move on to 4, where we create and format what's called an Excel table. A table is something different within a spreadsheet. It begins to be a tool where it's not just a bunch of rows and columns with cells in it. It takes on special properties. A table is like upgrading a range of cells so that you say the top row typically has some labels in it. All the rest is data that's going to go down through the various rows. And we're going to be able to manipulate it. We want to say it's a table so that we can manipulate it in various quick ways that such tables are manipulated. We've seen things in the past where it's just titles and subtitles, or the top of an inventory sheet where it had a bunch of different categories that had to be filled in. But a table is something like what we're looking at on screen, where we have the labels across the top, we have all these different columns of information, and it's generally recognized as a glued together source of data. Each column contributes something to the big picture. But it's not a table unless we specifically turn it into one. We're going to turn this long bit of information. You'll notice there are many rows of data. It goes all the way down to 60. We're going to turn all of this into one long chunk of table data. So it tells us to select it all. A4, remember you can check the name box to make sure, A4 over to E60. I've gone over to E, and now I'm going to scroll down to 60. And here's one of these chances where you're going to have to do the scrolling just like I do. Normally I have the smaller screen so that you can see instructions and video together. Your screen's probably not going to be big enough to see all 60 of those, so you're going to have to scroll down like I do. Now at the bottom, it wants us to click the Quick Analysis tool, which you might remember from past videos is this little box here. And we click it, it gives us ways to analyze our data without having to mess around with all of the different tabs and groups in order to find what we want to do. We're going to go Quick Analysis. We're going to say that we want some sort of table. And we'll just choose Tables, the first option. You'll see it gives us a preview of what our data is already going to look like. And you'll see in that top row we have that darker blue where it puts the names of our columns in a different color. You'll notice that there's arrows next to those names too. That's going to give us some functionality in the table that we don't have if it's just a bunch of cells stuck together. And you can see how the formatting goes. It's even going to color every other line in a slightly different color, so it's easier for us to follow the data. That's a very helpful coloring ability that we don't really need for things where it's just scattered around. When you glue it all together in these boxes side by side like this, the alternating line colors will help. We just click Table, and it takes all of the data that we just had, and I'm going to scroll back up to the top. It takes all the data we just had, and it makes it look like what we had seen before in that preview. I'm going to click outside of it so you can see the actual colors again. We now have a table. It's gone from being cells. Now granted, those cells still exist, but now those cells are part of a table and they can be manipulated the way tables get manipulated. We'll actually use this term table a lot if you start getting into Microsoft Access as well. A table is one of the primary resources that you have within a database. For here, it's going to work a lot the same way, so you'll be familiar with it when that comes along. We want to apply a table style. Because this is now a table, if we click anywhere in it, we can start manipulating things. There's a Table Tools tab here. I can click Design. And all of these are things that you can do to a table as long as you have taken the steps that we just did to say, take this block of cells and treat it like one big unit. Treat it like a table. First thing we can do is we can give it some sort of appearance all at once. So we want to click any cell within the table. I just randomly chose this one here. And I'm going to click the More button on the Table Styles section. Here's our Table Styles group. The More button is always at the bottom, and this will open up a gallery. It tells me to choose Table Style Medium 15. You can see right here as I preview each one of these, everything changes in the actual table itself. This is how we had it set up by default, but each of these, by hovering over, we can preview ways to make the data look differently. It asks us for 15 from medium. Here's the mediums, and we want 15. I just got lucky knowing that this was the 15. I wasn't positive in advance. But when we click it, we get a preview on the left side of what it's going to look like the moment we choose 15. We don't have to stay there, but the instructions tell us to, so we'll click that, and now our table permanently looks like that. Think of the step up this is if you had to choose all of these cells and change the background to black and the font to white and all the different sizes. We had to choose every other row down here to make some of them light gray and the others white. This would be a ton of work. Instead, we do a table style, and because it knows that this block of text is a table now, not just a bunch of random things, it's now formally a table, we can manipulate it as a very quick action all at once. The visual side of tables isn't what's important, though. What's really important is that now it not only knows that we're treating this block together as data, but it now knows that somehow these things are related. There's some meaning that we can get from them, so we're going to start being able to do filtering and selecting and things like this, sorting them using the resources that we have on the screen. It's one quick change. But for the computer to know, for Excel to know that these things are somehow related and that the rows are all somehow grouped into the meaning, such as here's our January 2013 date where somebody got an MRI, it was patient 500 that did it. All these things are linked together in meaning. That allows us to take a big step up in how we process data. So we're going to create what's called a criteria range for an advanced filter. An advanced filter is something that, again, when we get to databases, you'll think of these as queries oftentimes. An advanced filter is a way of saying, instead of just filtering them by, as we've seen in past projects, everybody with the same area code in their phone number, or saying filter them only if something appears, we're going to be able to get really complex with the way that we filter things. And it doesn't actually take all that much to do it. We're going to select A4 through E4. That's all of those labels there at the top of our table. And we're going to copy them. There's lots of ways to copy. I prefer right-clicking so that you don't have to keep bouncing around between tabs. And we're going to paste them to cell G4. I click in G4, and again I'll just paste. You'll see everything that was copied here, including the appearance of it, is moved over to here. Now, we're going to select G3, because the instructions tell us to, G3, and we're going to type criteria range. There's criteria range in the cell. I'm going to hit enter to make the decision official. I've typed this in, and what it's basically saying is this little table here is going to give us the criteria that we need to filter away filter out the ones that don't meet our certain qualifications. We'll only be looking at the ones that we want to see. Now they want us to give some attention to style here, so make sure you click G3 again. We're going to change the font to Cambria. Mine happens to appear at the top. If you didn't have it there, you could alphabetically scroll down to Cambria and make the change. The other thing that it tells you to do is to change it to 16 in the size. We could do it this way. There's 16 there, but good to review a lot of the rarer used things. Remember, you can just use the increased font size. Click it a couple times and 16's there, so you don't have to do any sort of typing. We're going to do the same thing with another set of rows. Now notice that K doesn't fit. It's kind of jammed up, and the words employees doesn't fit there. So they want us to just make sure that column K can show the complete label. Now we could screw around with this and try to make it the exact size that we want and make it somewhat unpredictable what we're going to submit for the final project. Remember, if you ever want to show everything that's in there, all you have to do is click the column heading. I just clicked it once. You will head to the Home tab, Cells group, and when you choose Formatting, you can say to auto-fit the column width. So there's no sliding the border back from side to side. This will just have it automatically calculate how big we should make this. So I'm just choosing these rows, compacting it, Format, auto-fit the column width, and it starts squeezing the column based on what we see. We'll just manually tweak that so that it appears on one line like the other one. We can manually tweak it so that it appears on different lines. The key is that auto format is going to take what is on the screen and auto fit it to what we're looking at. Hopefully you get that slight advanced concept here. Instead of just thinking of auto fit as it takes one word and fits it, if you have it lined up with the border so that it all appears on one line, then auto fit will auto fit it as if you want it on one line. If we want it on two lines, we can approximate it with that border, but it would be crazy to keep sliding it back and forth to make sure that we have exactly what we want. So we get it generally how we want it, then we auto fit it, and that's what we're looking for. I chose it this way instead of this way because it started out in this format and it never told us to slide this back and forth. So I just left it as what was up top, and I went to auto fit. Now we need to start doing something. We've completed C. We need to create another section where the results of our filter will appear. This is going to be very, very new compared to what we were doing in the past. Hang on, watch how this turns out, and I'll explain the ideas in a minute. We want G8 for our next label, making sure it's G8, and it says type extract range in cell G8. I'm making a point of trying to find all the different ways that you can use these resources in new and exciting ways. We could go back and change things here. We could go back and change the font size there. Remember, you can, if we want to make things look exactly the same, we can choose the thing that we want it to look like, click Format Painter, and when we click it over here, it'll automatically make the changes for us. Cambria size 16. All it tells you here is set the same font and size. So you could do it the other way. Here's a chance. Remember, the Format Painter is always available to you. If we had more than one thing to work with, you could double click on the Format Painter and then we'd be able to keep painting a couple times. But we just have to do this one and it looks ready to go. Now we want some results. It talks about doing something in G9, so I'll scroll down a little bit so we can see it. We're going to copy the labels from G4 through K4 to cell G9. So here's G4 through K4. I'm going to copy them and paste them in cell G9. It's the exact same information that was above, just a quick copy and paste. So what have we done here? We've actually just set up part of our screen so that we can have a filter that doesn't work the way that we might have filtered data in the past. Before, if you filtered and you said you only want MRI, it would take things like this side and it would just get rid of this line because it doesn't say MRI. It would get rid of this line because it doesn't say MRI. It would just get rid of each of these so that you didn't see it. What we're doing here, an advanced filter gives us a different way of doing things. We can leave the original table alone. It's not going to hide anything in the original table. We're going to set up the criteria here. We're going to tell it these are the criteria you have to meet in order to be shown in our new table. And here will be the abbreviated table that in my example would only show the MRIs. So this one will stay the same. Our filtered list will appear over here. Let's see this in action. I've been saying here we could just filter by MRI. An advanced filter can do various conditions. I'm going to say we only want MRIs if the date is greater than December 31st, 2016. So another way of saying that is if it's from 2017 or later, keep it. It makes the list. If it's before 2017, filter it out. We don't care about it. So the condition in order to keep it is greater than 12/31/16. I tab over the next side, and I'm going to say, you know what? This isn't just anything from 2017. I only want to see the MRIs from 2017 or beyond. So the second condition that it has to meet is MRI. Now, in order to make the filter list, which is going to appear down here, in order to make the filter list, it has to be an MRI from 2016 or later. Got that? So we have two conditions it has to meet in order to make the list. It has to be an MRI, and it has to be from 2017 or later. But I'm not going to stop there. An advanced filter can be very advanced. You can include not just the MRIs from 2017 or beyond. You can include things that meet other conditions along this list of options. And in this case, they're going to say in H6, here's H, there's 6, we're going to say give us any CT scan. If the medical image that we're looking for is a CT scan, it doesn't matter when it's from. If it's from the day that this software was first used, back in like 2012 or something like that, January 2013, if it's a CT scan, here's an example, April 2013 CT scan. If it's a CT scan, put it on the list down below. Doesn't matter when it's from. If it's a CT scan, there's nothing not qualifying it here. Put it down below. Now, if it says MRI scan, then make sure it's from 2017 or beyond. So here's one line of conditions that can get you on the list down here. Here's another line of conditions that can get you on the list down here. This one just has a date. This one doesn't. So let's see how this works. You can see on this preview that it looks exactly the way that it should. We're on the right path. So we're going to click somewhere in the table, and we're going to say we're setting up one of those advanced sorts and filters. So I'm going to click a cell in the table. I randomly chose that one. Doesn't matter what you choose as long as it's somewhere in your table. And I'm going to click the advanced button. That's on the data tab. A lot of what we do today is going to be on the data tab. There's a sort and filter group somewhere near the middle, and you'll see there's an advanced button. When we click that, we get the option of filtering this in two different places. We can either filter the list, which is how we've been talking about it before. We can filter the list over here, or we can copy that list to another location. That's what we're going to do here. We're going to copy this list so that here we see the originals, all of the originals. Here we see just the filtered ones. You can see what an amazing tool this is compared to what we've been doing in the past. In the list range, we want to tell it where the information can come from. To follow the instructions to the letter, even though this isn't such a critical thing, it tells us do A4 through E60. That's a relative reference. Remember, as we copy and paste cells, that will change. What they show in the list range box that they automatically fill in is an absolute range. Here we have $ between the column letters and $ between before the row numbers. So as the formulas are copy and pasted, this will not be modified. Strictly speaking, this does not match this. Here's a new skill that we haven't used in these videos yet. We've learned that if you press the F4 button on the physical keyboard up at the top, it will add the $ for us. That actually cycles through various options how you can use the $. If it has $ already and you hit F4, like I am doing now, you'll see it changes so that only the row has $. The ones before the letters have disappeared, but the ones before the numbers stay. So if you wanted to make sure that the row was absolute, but the column changed when you pasted, you could do it this way. It also has the other option if you hit F4 again, like I'm doing now. Now it's locking you into a column absolutely, but it's leaving the row as something that's relative. So A has a $ before it, so whenever we talk about A, that won't change when you cut and paste, but things like the 4 and the 60 will change. Finally, if we click it a third time, which I'm doing now, Now it looks exactly like what they gave us in the instructions up top in step G. Always make sure that things appear exactly the same way, even if you don't think that it's going to make a difference. You never know what they'll do just in terms of grading. If you didn't do what they say, you're going to lose the points. So what this is saying is this is where all of our data comes from. This is our list of data that we're going to be filtering. Now we need a criteria range. We're going to click in that criteria range, and where does our criteria come from? G4 through K6. We set up this table over here, G4 through K6, and you'll see the little advanced filter dialog popping up over around here. G4 through K6 is showing in the little box to the upper right. I let go, and it fills it in over here. Now, does it actually say that? No, I'm going to make sure that I clear out the stuff that it doesn't demand of me. All of this, if you see advanced filter appear here, you can get rid of that. We're going to select what's there again by dragging the cursor over it. We're going to hit F4 a couple times till it looks exactly like what they wanted of us. Now, all the things that we saw when it said advanced filter at the start, when it had the dollar signs, that's all referring to the same place. We're just matching absolutely what it says in the instruction sheet. And then finally, the copy to. Where do we place the final results? We're going to say G9 through K9. Here's G9. Make sure that you got the right thing. And you'll notice I actually clicked G10 originally. So I didn't get the correct path. Thank goodness I'm checking in this box, or I would have just lost a bunch of points. It says G9 through K9. And I OK it. Doesn't look exactly like what they tell me, so I'm going to get rid of the extras. I'm going to just match exactly what the instruction sheet says, even though it all means the same thing in different ways. And I'll hit F4 a couple times. And you can see that we've got exactly what they've listed each time. A4 through E60. This is where we'll be getting our original records from. This is the criteria range, where we say what it is that drives the filter, what conditions have to be met. And then where do we copy it to? We're going to copy it down here. Wherever these titles are, it's going to start filling in below. We can skip unique records only. Doesn't matter. There's no reason this would have to be unique. I'm just going to click OK for the R advanced filter. And you'll see what happens down below. Every record that meets our conditions will appear on this list, and none of the others will. So it looked at the first record, January 2013, MRI. It is an MRI, but we only want the ones from 2017 or beyond. Went to the next. Ultrasonography. That isn't either of the types of images we want, so it skipped it. Another MRI, not before 2017, after 2017 or beyond. Skips it. Now we hit a CT scan. Doesn't matter where the date is because we didn't want one. So it includes that April 2013 CT scan on our list. And it copies all the information from that row, the 500, the 1800s, the 4, copies all of that into this section over here. As we scroll down this list that has been copied eventually, when we hit 2017, you'll see the MRIs do start appearing that are on this list. We have to go all the way down to 2017 to see them. But in 2017, we do have these two MRIs. When we go up to the top of the list, the MRIs are there. So it only included the MRIs because we said 2017 or beyond. So we're looking at the filter over here. We're looking at the original data over here. That's a huge, huge change that you can get with what Excel is capable of. It's an absolutely wonderful feature in Excel. So we're looking at two different things here. And now we're going to they give actually I should mention the warning that they give. If your PC changes the dates so that it looks different than this April 2013, that's fine. That's just your computer setting them up to look a certain way. When you submit the project, that won't be an issue if yours look different. Okay, there's something else that's really adds to your power when you're working with Excel, and this is called conditional formatting. What you're going to do is, in this case, we created a list based on certain conditions. Now, conditional formatting will allow us to look at a cell, and based on the value that's inside that cell, we can give it a different background color, we can give the font a different style or size, or add the bolds, italics, things like this. Conditional formatting allows us to manipulate the appearance of a cell based on what's inside of it. Now here we actually had to set up a mini little, it is essentially a table of our criteria. You don't have to do that with conditional formatting. It's a very different kind of thing. We're going to select I-10 through I-25. Here's column I-10 through I-25. And what we're saying here is, we want, after this table is created, we want the software to look at the values in here and decide if a certain condition is met. Let's put a different color on there. Let's highlight them in a different color. Let's make them appear a different way so that our eye is drawn to them. Well, how we do this is Home tab, Styles group. There's a conditional formatting button. Home tab, Styles group. Here's our conditional formatting button. When we click it, we have a bunch of options for how we decide what we're going to put in these cells. Highlight cell rules is what they have us choose, and they want us to do a greater than situation. So we are setting up a rule that says if the value in these cells that we've chosen is greater than something, then we're going to make it look different. I'm going to click greater than, and it says, well, greater than what? Instructions say 751. They suggest 750, but 751 is what the instructions want. And you see the preview over here, it changes to a red background color with red numbers. They're actually telling us to use the green fill, here it is, with the dark green text, because that's a positive thing. We have a large number of patients on this. And we OK it. I should show you ahead of time, it does tell us to OK it. When we OK it, those conditions are now applied to anything that has a value here over 751. 750 isn't enough, 500 certainly isn't enough, 1000 is, so it changes to the green with dark green numbers. You can set up not just any condition with the greater thans or less thans. You can actually add layers now to conditional formatting. It's not part of this project, but you should know that you can add layers to this so that if 1000 was really good, maybe 500 is pretty bad. So you could say if something is, you could add another condition saying if the value is less than 501, make it red with dark red text. So the green ones quickly show you when something was good. If the red ones would quickly show you when something was bad. One of the common uses that I use all the time for this is I'll highlight student grades and have a different color for the A's and a different color for the B's and a different color for the C's. And I can look at the grade book and tell where everybody's grade is at just by seeing the colors. There are so many wonderful uses for conditional formatting. It's really going to become your friend if you use an awful lot of Excel through the years. Now, I mentioned one of the biggest things that we do when we're stepping up to intermediate is we have to start thinking about this in terms of the people that we will be working with, who are also going to be somehow connected to the work that we're doing. Imagine that someone sent us a list of data that's supposed to go into our expense info tab. Right now, if you click on the expense info tab, which step 9a tells us to do, when you click on expense info, all we have is a title and a subtitle. There's nothing else in our table. Well, nothing else in our worksheet as a whole. Absolutely nothing here. It tells us to click in A3, and we're going to start importing data here somehow. It tells us to get the From Text button. Probably you don't know where that is. I mentioned where we're using the Data tab a lot. It says it's at the Data tab, Get External Data Group. So I click this, and the very first group is Get External Data, and here are all the different places where you can get data from. You could get it from an Access database, you could get it from the web, you could get it from a text file, which is what we're going to use. Remember, it says from text. We're going to use this. There's other sources that you can pick from. But for us, we're just going to import our data from a text file. Imagine you open up your email, they said attached is the data that you need for your expense info sheet. You're going to import it from what they sent you. So I'm going to say from text. We stored this file, this CSV file that we're looking for, in our documents folder, so make sure that you go back to where it was that you said it was. Click on the expense file here, make sure it ends in CSV so you have the right file, and so that you can see instructions, we want import. Now it's going to open that up, and it's going to try to figure out what you're looking at. It wants to import the information for you, but you're probably going to have to get a little bit of help here. Is this delimited, or is this fixed width? What in the world does this mean? Delimited means that we will enter a bit of information, and then we will put something, let's say a comma, and then we'll give the next bit of information, and then we'll use another comma, and then we'll use another information and another comma, and more information, another comma. The comma is called the delimiter, and it doesn't have to be a comma, as we'll see in a minute. Imagine if you were doing something like addresses, where you wanted the whole address on the one line, but there's a comma in addresses between the city and the state. You can't use a comma as the delimiter. You have to choose something else. So you just have to know what the delimiter is that people use. In this case, you get a little preview of what's in here, and you'll see the delimiter right here is a comma. Now this one won't count because this is included in quotation marks, but when we're done with it, with what that string is, there's a comma, and then there's a date and another comma. So we can see this is a delimited file. Fixed width would mean if we said something like let's say every record is going to be, every field that you're loading in is going to be 20 characters long. It will import 20 characters, and then the next 20 characters goes towards to the next column. Then the next 20 after that goes to the following column. Problem with this approach is that when you save the file, if you have someone's first name like Jim takes up 3 letters, it's going to take up 3 letters and then 17 blank spaces in your file. So fixed width really does waste a lot of time, but it also takes care of the problem that you have if you can't find a delimiter that works well. It just says choose delimiter, the delimited approach, and click next. Now it wants to know what the delimiter is. Remember, I mentioned before, if the comma doesn't work, then you have to use something else. Semicolon might not work, commas might not work. You have to choose what it is that is our delimiter. So we don't want tab. It's not a tab, and you don't see any tabs down here. We're going to remove tab because that's not our delimiter. Our delimiter is the comma. There's a comma, there's a comma. We can figure it out. We want comma, not tab. Notice that you can actually force a delimiter. There is an other option. So if for some random reason you wanted a capital Q to be your delimiter, then you would see the first field given here, and then a capital Q. And then the next field would appear in a capital Q where all the commas were. So you can use absolutely anything as a delimiter. So now we've said in this case it's the comma, and you'll see it divides up the boxes so that we can see what would the result be if we chose comma. And that is exactly what we want. We want these different columns this way. So I'm just going to click, here we have the marked comma, finish, and it'll make sure that these settings are what you want. You can just click OK. And you'll see where we were at A3, all of that information has been copied in. So we didn't have to type any of this. It's not like I paused the video and typed all this in. I just imported it from that CSV file. CSV actually gives away what the delimiter is. The C stands for comma. So at this point now we've got all this information in without having to type any of it. Let's make sure that we can turn this into something more table-like. We have our title and subtitle. Just to keep things a little saner, we're going to insert 2 blank rows at the row 3 position. I'll right-click it, I'll do insert, gives us one of the 2. I have to repeat the process, insert. So we've got 2 rows here. It says in cell A4, we're going to type representative. We'll head over to B4 and type date, and we'll head to C4 and type amount. Now you'll see this isn't formatted the best way. All we've done is enter the labels in. We have to auto-fit column C. So I'm going to choose column C. Here's the various properties we have. We could get through it here, but I think the slightly rarer way that we might want to remember is if we're going to auto-fit things, we can go to the Home tab, Format Group, and auto-fit the column width. Now it expands it so that the label amount fits. Time to sort our data. Remember, we used filters, and filters just remove the data, but there are times where somebody might be looking at your data and they just want it rearranged. Imagine that this list contains the same person many times. Here's Mary Jo Allen. Here she is again. And she'll actually appear a couple places on this list. Mary Jo Allen, Mary Jo Allen, Mary Jo Allen. She appears a lot of times in the list. What we're going to do is we're going to sort it by clicking the start of it. Here's A5. It says click on A5. We're going to click the Sort and Filter button. Home tab, Editing Group, which is the last of the groups. And we're going to do Sort and Filter, one of the big buttons. And we're just going to say A to Z. Notice the order that they appear over here. The moment we say A to Z, it rearranges them so that all the AL names appear, then the B names, then the G names, and the entire list is now sorted alphabetically. We could have chosen another column and sorted it by date or sorted it by this amount. We could have chosen that, but we decided to go with this column and sorted it A through Z. Now we're going to do something that this A to Z arrangement is really made for. Like I mentioned, we're working with a sheet that we might want to pass on to other people. Before we did the import, where we were able to get information from our co-workers so that we could help create these. What we're going to do now is subtotal is a quick way of rearranging the things that we see on screen right now, where we have 3 different entries for Mary Jo Allen, and we have 3 different entries here, and we have 3 here, and 3 and 3. What we really want to do is we want to group them together and figure out what the sum is just for that person. And then here's the sum for just that person. This is called creating a subtotal, so that we will subdivide this list and give the total just for each person. Now there are a ton of ways you can subdivide. What I just described is how we're going to do it on this table. We want to subdivide so that we will see all of Mary Jo Allen's information all at once. And then we'll see the different groups of information for everybody else as a whole. So we are going to click on A5 again, and we're going to hunt down the subtotal button. So much of today is about the Data tab. So it's on the Data tab, Outline Group, and we want subtotal. Here it is over here. And the moment that you click on that button, this really does give you an almost English language version of what you're going to do. At each change in something, we're going to use this function and add the subtotal to one of these various rows. Now it just so happens this one is set up the way that the software wants us to. For each change in representative, so we're saying when we stop seeing Mary Jo Allen and it changes to the next name, we can click the arrow. We could have done it by every change in date if that's how it was sorted, every change in the amount, but we sorted by representative. So we're going to say every time that the representative changes, we want to use the function average. So I'm going to drop down this list. I'm going to pick average. And we're going to put that average in the amount column. The amount box is chosen. So before I click OK, make sure you get that basic concept down. It's going to look at this list that we had. Every time, make sure that I got the right thing. I'm going to cancel just to be safe. Hopefully you chose A5. Looks like everything's fine on that. I was fine to begin with. When I click the subtotal button, yeah, it chose A4 for me. For every time the representative changes, we go from Mary Jo Allen to Atef Bashir. We're going to insert a subtotal line, which will say that, which will give us the average for that representative. So every time we see a change in representative, here's the change, we're going to put the average right below as a subtotal, and we'll place that, the number itself, in the amount column. So it'll go into column C. When I click OK, now you'll see, here's our labels across the top. Mary Jo Ellen, Mary Jo Ellen, Mary Jo Ellen. Here's Mary Jo Ellen's average. And it takes the three values that belong to her and gives us the average for it. 691.667. Then it goes to the next person, and you notice that this is the average for person number 2. Here's the average for person number 3, for number 4, for number 5. And then there's a grand average inserted at the bottom where you take everybody all together. There's actually something big going on here. You'll notice that this appears along the sides too. Here we start to see the different levels that are appearing. Here's one subdivision here, here's another subdivision, here's another subdivision. We'll see that change take place in the morning where we can use this in a fancier way. One last change. Be very careful not to miss this. This would be a quick way to lose 2 or 3 points on your final project. These are supposed to be numbers, so we want column C to appear as currency with no decimal places. One of those tricky things, people might run over here and start looking for accounting and currency things. But that's not going to get you the full details that you want. If you really want to get it so that it's currency and you control the decimal places, right-click on it and choose Format Cells. If you were doing this on your own without somebody guiding you through it, there's a good chance you would have spent a little time hunting down how to control this one option, and that's what they're after. They want you to push your abilities here. I'm going to click Currency, and that has the $, but it has 2 decimal places to begin with. I'll get rid of the 2 decimal places and OK it. And now everything looks like currency. Very easy to step to miss, especially after you've done such a big change like this. Now I'm going to do something new with this information that we have. This is one of the most powerful things that you are going to get. If there's one portion of this video that you really should be paying close attention to, this is the one, Goal Seek. Goal Seek allows you to take the data that you have and start thinking, what do I wish that data looked like and how can I make that happen? So we're not happy with the data at hand. Yes, it is the real data, but now we have to start saying, what if we made changes? How could we make changes that get us the results that we want? And in this case, we're going to look at Mary Jo Allen's average. Currently, she's at 692. What if you really wanted that to be 600 instead? That's a little higher than you wanted for Mary Jo Allen for some reason. How can we make that happen? This is what Goal Seek is all about. It really is one of the most powerful tools that you can play with in this software. We're going to head over to cell E4. 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 And we're going to type a label for this, Target March Expense. So we have a label here. You'll notice in the instructions they give us a diagram of what they're looking for here. Now we want to click in C8. Here's C, here's 8. So we've clicked in C8, and we want to do something about the what if analysis. What if we wanted this to be 600 instead of what it currently is? We're going to use that tool, again, Data tab. Today's all about the Data tab. And you'll find the What If analysis in the Data Tools group. Data Tools group, here's What If analysis. I'm going to move this a little along so we see they want us to choose Goal Seek. So we click that and we choose Goal Seek. Again, this is one of those where if you read the little labels for what we're supposed to be entering, you might even be able to figure this one out on yourself. We want to do something that would allow us to set cell C8, the one we just clicked into, to a new value. We want it to be 600. It's too much now. for some reason. So we want 600 instead of 692. How could we do that? Well, obviously we have to change something. We're admitting the real numbers don't work. Which numbers do we want to change in order to get there? It's going to say, what if we changed cell C7? That's the one right above it. I'll type C7. How much would C7 have to go down in order to have an average of 600? When we click OK, remember, this isn't a total. We can't just subtract the $92 that is extra. We need the average to go down, not the sum. So we're going to click OK here. And it predicts here, if we want the target value of 600, we're going to have to change the one above to 600. And when you figure out that average, it's already at 600. This is 150 over. This is 150 under. When you figure out the average, yeah, the average really would be 600 if we changed this to 600. Now we're going to cancel this. We don't want to actually make that change there because these are a real number. These are real numbers. But we are going to record what that should be in F5. So I'm going to cancel this. You should too. This isn't time where I'm canceling just because I'm the one making the video. You should cancel too. It says so right in the instructions. And in F5, there's F, there's 5. In F5, it wants us to type $600. So $600, enter, and there's our March target expense. Notice this is the March row. That's why it says March target expense. So if we were to change this to 600, then we would achieve a 600 average. Okay, now we talked about these arrows before. These are called outline groups. And essentially, the outline is this group of information. It's not an official table, but it's a range. It's this range that's very table-like. The outermost layer is everybody taken together. And then there is a group of people, a group of entries, just for Mary Jo Allen. And they're going to tell us to collapse some of these groups. We want to see Mary Jo Allen, but let's say we didn't want what is in row 12. We actually don't care about Atef Bashir's average. The little minus sign here allows us to collapse his group. Look at these 3 entries. When we hit the minus sign, we hide all the individual values. We'll still see his overall average, we just don't want to see the original data. It says 16, 20, and 24 should also be shrunk down. Here's 16. And it gets reduced to up here. Here's 20, and it gets reduced up here. And finally, here's 24. It gets reduced. We've left Mary Jo Allen's original data open. We've hidden the data from everybody else. So there's another way where you can have the analysis. Remember, we added these average lines with subtotal abilities. We added that, and then we hid the original data it came from. So you're not looking at anything that you had to type in or that you got from a coworker. We have now gotten rid of everything, with the exception of Mary Jo Allen. We've gotten rid of everything that was original data, and we're just showing nothing but our calculations now. Okay, here's our last big concept to throw in, which is a pivot table. We've used tables before. We were just doing them when we created on the previous project. Again, don't click with me. This is just for the visual display. Here's how we had an original row, an original range of data that made up of various rows and columns. We changed it to a table when we went over here. We're going to now build on this idea and create something that's called a pivot table, which is a lot like a table here, only it's kind of a live table where you can start manipulating it in really impressive ways. We're going to select the past and projected sheet. So this is the same thing that before we turned into a table. We're going to select the exact same range, A4 through E60. And we're going to go to the same place that we did last time when we created a table. We can go to the Quick Analysis tool. I go to the Quick Analysis tool, click it. I want tables, so I click that. What we did last time was we just chose table, and it made it look like that. We changed the colors later. So that's what we did last time. This time we want a pivot table. Now there's a lot of ways you can make a pivot table, and you'll see the previews here of how each one could possibly look. To follow their instructions, it says point at several so that you can see what they all look like. Choose the one that shows a sum of each field. So I'm going down here. I'm going to click the tables again. I'm going to preview each pivot table and look. Well, this has the sum of patients. That's not all of them. This has the sum of total hours. That's not all of them. This one has a sum of all three. There's the one I'm looking for. I'll make sure that this one doesn't match. No, that's not the sums. That's just grand total again. So this one actually shows us the sum of all three. So that's the one that the instructions tell us we should pick. Notice something happens immediately. It doesn't change past and projected all. It creates an entirely new sheet, and it copies our data in something that's called a pivot table that has these collapsible sections like our previous work has shown us. It also has something over here about pivot table fields. We're allowed to somehow manipulate this. This is really, really different than when we just inserted a regular table and made it look like this. This pivot table is a much more impressive tool, and you typically pass a pivot table on to somebody else so that they can play with your data and learn from it in ways that you didn't originally design the table to display. Pivot table just references the data. It doesn't actually change what's in there, so as you play around with it, you don't have to worry about hurting the original. You can intentionally do that if you want, but the manipulations don't change anything in the original data source. So I'm going to point at the label here where it currently says sheet 2 at the bottom. I'm just going to point at that, double click, and we'll change its name to pivot table. Just so you get a little bit of understanding on this, as we rearrange rows and filters, I'm going to go full screen with this for a second. As we rearrange these rows, you'll see we can do things like moving up and down. So maybe month is more important to us than the image type. You can move these around. As you rearrange the importance of that, you essentially pivot the data that appears on the pivot table itself. You are pivoting the data itself by rearranging it here. That's where the name is originally going to come from. Let me switch back to the bottom of the screen. So now we have a pivot table, and not only that, but we have ourselves on the final page of this project. We have a pivot table, and now somebody else can start manipulating this data and working it around so that they can learn new things from it too. You can also do something that's called a pivot chart. Pivot chart is a chart that uses your pivot table data. And just like the pivot table changes when people manipulate it on this grouping on the side, the chart that's associated with it is also going to be manipulated so that it matches the change. So both table and chart will work in the same way. I'm going to click anywhere within the pivot table, and you can tell right away that if you're in the pivot table because the pivot table and pane will be open here. And I'm going to click the pivot chart button. Here's our pivot table tools. We want the Analyze tab, Tools group, which is over here. We're going to click the Pivot Chart button. We're going to get that familiar chart dialog, only we'll know just because of the button we clicked that we want a pivot chart instead of a regular one. We want line with markers. Remember from the previous video that the markers are the little dots that go with each data point. And then we'll click OK. So we want line with markers. I know that's the one because I see the dots in the preview. So it's line with markers, and we hit OK. Now we have this chart that appears, which is the information that we see in the summary over here. And we can also start manipulating how the pivot chart looks over here. But let's not do anything the instructions don't tell us to. Step E says position the chart to the right of the pivot table. I'm just going to grab anywhere where I see this move dialog with the black arrows up, down, left, and right. And it says go to the go to the right of the pivot table. Pivot table ends over here, so the right of it begins over there. And I can let go. We now have a pivot table. We can see the original source. We can manipulate all of this. This is essentially something that you have designed for some other user, and the user is going to be able to go in, work with your data. As they do it, will manipulate this chart. They will be able to glean different understandings from it than just the default that you get when you design a chart and say, look at this specific thing. This will allow them to play around with it all that they want and get what they want out of it and build more understandings than just what a simple unchangeable chart would allow them to do. So you're really designing this one for somebody else. One thing to check out here, you can actually remove different fields, and this is where we're going to start to see the first glance of how you're able to manipulate something on the fly like this. Imagine you received this from somebody. It says we want to remove the check mark for the number of employees. In this case, the two of them are linked. I'm going to go full screen so you have an easier glance at this. You'll see here's the fields that we want reported, and those fields appear in there. If I take patients off, just so you can see that happen, my chart instantly changes. Also, it removes it from the table as well. So it removes it from the chart, removes it from the table. If I click the button back, that's automatically added back, both in the table and in the chart. Imagine that you're the boss who has just received a chart with this data. You don't want to have to change the chart and forever lose how it originally looked. We're just going to figure out, okay, what happens if I remove the month? Nothing. What if I remove the image type? Oh, that really says something. That's pretty strange. I'm going to put image back in. What if I change number of employees? We have all of these different really weird changes that we can do. I'm going to do some undoing here and get back to what our original looked like. What the instructions wanted us to do is it said, get rid of the number of employees. You can see number of employees is this blue one at the bottom, and it's kind of just a straight line that doesn't tell us anything anyway. So I'm going to get rid of that on the side. It also disappears over here. And now this is a little more helpful. The useless one that goes across the bottom really isn't necessary. We're starting to see how the pivot chart is something that someone who receives your Excel workbook, how it could actually benefit them in their job now that you've sent them your resource. I'm getting out of full screen mode just so that you can see the instructions. But you'll also see we're on the right path. Here's another one of those previews. Number of employees wasn't chosen. This is looking exactly like what they want us to do. You can also see on the side here, we're almost done with this project. There's just one more thing to think about. Specifically, you might not want everybody to have access to every piece of your workbook when you send it. Imagine that you were the corporate president for some entertainment company. Yes, you want the people who handle the legal paperwork for your contracts to be able to look up famous recording artists' home addresses and cell phone numbers. You don't want people like the office secretary at the front desk to be able to access that same super private, valuable information. What you can do is you can either lock these cells, or you can flat out lock larger sections and maybe not even allow people to see different sections. You control what's visible and what isn't. Right now, we've said that there's a locked property for some of these. This came in the file that you started with. Some of them were locked. Now, locked cells require a password in order to have any difference. If you have the password, it unlocks the cells. If you don't have the password, you can't do anything to them. So currently there's no password. That's why we've been able to edit things. But if the moment we add a password, which we're going to do down in step 17, the locked cells would be uneditable. So we want to change that before we do the password. We're going to click the Past and Projected Sheet tab. Now we've gone to Past and Projected. We select cells C5 through E60, which is still selected from the last thing I did. If yours isn't still selected, you'll have to choose them again. We're going to choose Format Cells from the menu. There's Format Cells. I right-clicked somewhere in that table. Well, excuse me, somewhere from that range. And we're going to go to the Protection tab. Usually we use the number tab. We're going to go to the protection tab. These cells currently say that they are locked. We don't want them to be locked, so we just unclear the check mark and we'll hit OK. Before I hit OK though, I mean, you can, if you did, that's fine, but I'm just going to, before I hit it, I'm going to point out hidden is an option too. So if we were trying to hide these all together so that the person at the front desk can't find out where the famous singer lives and get their phone number, we could choose hidden instead. Locked, we might be able to say they can see it, but nobody can edit it. So now I'm going to click OK like we were told in the instructions above. No visual sign that it happened, but we did unlock each of those cells. If we were to go back and check if they were locked or not, we'd see that they weren't. So finally, and it kind of gives away, here's save and close, we're at the end of this one. Finally, in step 17, we're going to add a password to the sheet. All the locking that we've done, all the hiding that we've done, which we haven't done a lot of setting, but we could do those things. All of that we did doesn't make a difference unless we protect the sheet with a password. This is one of the final stages, and we're going to see the review tab for the first time. Review is when you are essentially done with the project and you are going to start doing things like protecting entire sheets, protecting the entire workbook. You'll start sharing it. You can start drawing on it. You can even add comments. If somebody sent you another, you might want to put comments all throughout it to make suggestions. The review tab is that now that you're done, let's do something with it right before we send it off. It tells us to look for the Protect Sheet button. That's the very first one here. I accidentally pressed the wrong button, so I just canceled out. I'm doing Protect Sheet. We want to place check marks for select locked cells and select unlocked cells. Both of those are already checked for us. Most of the time they should be able to be there. And what that's basically saying is if you have the correct password, then what can you select? We're going to allow anybody to select the locked cells, select the unlocked cells, but that just says you can click on them. If we didn't have those checked, you wouldn't even be able to click on them. It wants us to put in a password. 321, the worst possible password that they could use, short of a smaller version of the same. Now I'm going to click OK. Now this is a really big deal. You don't want to screw up your password, so like most websites where you have to enter it again to confirm you typed the correct thing, I'm going to type it again, 3, 2, 1, and I'll click OK. It appears like there's no visual change to the sheet, but we can tell that the sheet is protected for one simple reason. The Protect Sheet button changes to an Unprotect Sheet button. So we know this one is now protected. If we had hidden cells, they would disappear. If we had locked cells, we wouldn't be able to edit them in any way. And if we hadn't checked those two boxes for select them, we wouldn't even be able to click there. So we've now secured our information so that if we do share this with somebody else, or if we put it on a network drive and we tell other people that they can access it, this makes sure that the data doesn't get screwed up by somebody who's a little too ambitious playing with it. The sheet is now protected from miscreant users or accidents. Time to see how we did. As always, start with the save. I'm going to close the workbook, and we'll see SimNet is ready for us down below where we left it. Time to upload our file. And remember, be careful this time. We did have that comma-separated list over here that we used as a resource. Make sure you're using the one that's the file that you've been working in, ends in XLSX. Make sure you chose that one and not your resource file. You click open, it uploads relatively quick, submits it. If we wish, do we want to, it looks like the right file. I'll submit it, and now it's going to grade it for us. How did we do on this project? We got the 100 this time. And as always, we can see each of the things. If we did make a mistake, we'd see it in red, or sometimes there's blue thrown in here too for different meanings. You are now, if you were able to successfully complete this project, you are now an intermediate user of Microsoft Excel working on becoming an expert. You have stepped up a huge level in this project. You have added new concepts that we really need if you're going to be working with this in a professional setting. You are now a secure intermediate user on your way to being an expert. I hope that, as I hope at the end of every video, I hope that you'll open up Excel and play with this some yourself. It's great to follow along with a project they gave you, but imagine what you can do with this yourself, and you'll get a lot more out of these projects. Soon we'll be doing Chapter 5, which is going to take this into a slightly different direction, but a direction that's going to help you work a little more efficiently in many ways and carry the life of a spreadsheet for much, much longer distances than the average spreadsheet lasts. I'll see everybody in the next video, and I hope you'll take advantage of what you've learned.